Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. A tropical rainstorm is developing in the Caribbean, and here to explain exactly what could happen next is AccuWeather lead hurricane expert Alex DaSilva. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we were just chatting before we started recording that a rainstorm is brewing. It is not yet a tropical storm. Can you tell us exactly what is happening right now?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a big cluster of thunderstorms east of the Lesser Antilles right now, moving that way. We're calling it a tropical rainstorm because it officially does not have the designation of being a tropical storm. In order for it to be a tropical storm, you really need a center of circulation to become organized. You don't want it to be kind of oblong or egg-shaped. You really need a tight circulation in order for an official tropical designation. Right now, it does have the wind speeds necessary to become a tropical storm or to become a tropical depression, which would be the first step. But again, we're looking for that closed circulation. So essentially the winds are just not in a circular pattern enough, basically, for it to become a tropical depression or tropical storm. The first step would be a tropical depression, which has winds of around 35 miles per hour. And then once those winds approach 40 miles per hour, greater than 39, that's when we officially get the tropical storm designation, which the next name on the list would be Ernesto. And I'm thinking that that could happen sometime during the day tomorrow. The storm should be, or the rainstorm should be organized enough that it would get that designation, I think, sometime during the day on Tuesday.
I see. I was going to ask, what are the hour-by-hour projections that AccuWeather is putting out there right now?
Yeah, so sometime tonight, the storm might be able to get enough organization to become a tropical depression. It's going to be close. The hurricane hunters are flying around in the storm, and it's up to them to kind of decide whether the storm has essentially what we call closed off. So that means that the winds are blowing in a circular pattern, and essentially the winds are strong enough. So I think the winds are strong enough for this to become a tropical depression right now. However, we don't have that closed low. We don't have that closed circulation. The wind's going in a counterclockwise formation. We don't have that quite yet, enough to get that designation. But as the storm organizes, I believe that that will come sometime either late tonight or during the day tomorrow.
Which parts of the country or which parts of the Caribbean are under a tropical storm warning right now, and or who should be preparing?
Yeah, so the northern portions of the Lesser Antilles, so that island chain that's way out in the Eastern Caribbean, the northernmost of those islands are out on tropical storm warning right now, as well as Puerto Rico. The entire island of Puerto Rico is also on tropical storm warning as we speak. So tropical storm conditions can start to be expected within the next 24 hours across all of those islands there that are under a tropical storm warning. So that would be winds greater than 40 miles per hour across those islands. Those can be expected during the day tomorrow as the storm moves through. Again, likely to become Ernesto sometime during the day tomorrow. It'll officially get that designation. But the storm is moving very quickly. So the good news is that it will move across the islands fairly quickly here. And by Wednesday afternoon, it should be north of Puerto Rico starting to pull away.
Pull away. So does that mean that the east coast of Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina going up the east coast, do folks who live in those areas not have to worry?
I think from a direct hit from this storm, they probably don't have to worry. However, once it gets north of Puerto Rico, we're expecting Ernesto to become a hurricane. And so these hurricanes can produce a lot of waves, and so those waves will propagate westward towards the United States. And by the time I think Friday comes around, I'm very concerned about the rip current risk along the entire southeast coast of the United States. And then as we go into the weekend, we have to look all the way up the East Coast, even up into New England, for a high rip current risk. And so many times we see, these tropical systems staying far away from the United States, but unfortunately, time after time, we see some deaths even on the East Coast of the beaches because the dangerous rip currents. It can be a beautiful sunny day, with not a cloud in the sky, but hundreds of miles away, if there's a hurricane, the danger exists for those dangerous rip currents. And we really want to push the message out there that, along the entire eastern seaboard, we could be dealing with very dangerous rip currents. We want people to heed the advice from their lifeguards, to stay out of the water if there's high rip current risk. So swim at beaches with a lifeguard and always listen to what the lifeguards have to say.
Always listen to lifeguards. That is worth underlining. Now, what about folks who might be planning to go on a boat trip up and down the eastern seaboard this weekend? Should they cancel their plans?
Well, if you're going to be in any kind of inner harbor, you're probably going to be okay. There might be a little bit increased wave action in the inner harbors, but certainly if you get way out to sea, any kind of deep sea fishing, things like that, there could be some increased wave action. So it's a case-by-case basis, of course, depending on the ship and things like that. But certainly you would want to take your advice of your captain if you're going out on a deep sea fishing trip, things like that. But farther out into the Atlantic Ocean, those areas are going to see greater wave action. When you get more into the inner harbors, those areas are a little bit more protected. While there might be a little bit more increased wave action, those areas should be fairly okay close to shore.
Now, one of the headlines I've seen in relation to this tropical rainstorm is a potential tropical cyclone 5 is moving rapidly westward. Is that the same weather system or is that a different weather system?
Yeah, so the National Hurricane Center, they designate these storms as potential tropical cyclones when they want to put out watches and warnings. That's kind of their a way of doing things. It kind of gets the message out to the public. Us here at AccuWeather, we started drawing our tracks before the National Hurricane Center did, so we wanted to get the message out to the public as soon as possible. So when we thought there was a risk of development, we started drawing our own tropical tracks for this storm. But yes, it is the same thing. It's the same storm system. If you hear potential tropical cyclone, that is just the National Hurricane Center's designation of what this tropical wave or tropical rainstorm is.
Alex, we've talked in the past about your prediction and forecast for this hurricane season. It's the middle of August. How are things going relative to what we expected at this point in the season? And what can we expect in the coming weeks?
Well, certainly we expected a very busy season, and we're still expecting a busy season. We're only, in the middle of August right now, so we're still going up the ladder when it comes to tropical activity. The peak of the hurricane season is September 10th, so we still have a little bit of a ways to go before we get to the climatological peak. We've seen 4 named storms so far. Ernesto, when it becomes named, likely tomorrow, will be the 5th named storm on the Atlantic hurricane season list. We're forecasting 20 to 25. So that would mean that even after Ernesto, we're forecasting at least another about 15 storms or so before the end of the hurricane season, which ends at the end of November. So again, we're really starting to ramp things up. I don't see too much activity immediately following Ernesto. We might kind of go into a bit of a lull. We have a lot of African dust coming across the basin, I think, starting next week. So that might keep a lid on things for now. However, as we go into the month of September, the climatological peak, things could really ramp up. You could see multiple storms going on at one time across the basin.
Multiple storms at one time. That is slightly terrifying. What do you say to folks who feel like they're only just recovering from Hurricane Debbie? We were seeing reports over the weekend that areas of the East Coast were still flooded, people still, quote unquote, digging out. What do you say to those communities?
Yeah, I think certainly the good news is that I don't really see anything in the near term that would affect those same areas, any kind of crazy weather or another tropical cyclone at the current time. Ernesto should remain well off the East Coast, aside from the dangerous rip currents, should stay far enough away that it really shouldn't pose much of a risk, at least in terms of the same areas that got hit recently there with the hurricane. Now, as we go down the road into next month, especially, we have to watch a lot of those same areas. We are very concerned still about the Texas coast. Of course, they were hit early in the season by Beryl. We're still concerned about Florida and even the Carolinas for the rest of the tropical season. So the best advice that I can give is just keep up with the forecast, check AccuWeather often in terms of, checking in on the tracks once we start to issue them on particular storms, and just have a plan. But again, the good news is, I think for the near term, the weather should cooperate for any kind of cleanup efforts.
Cooperating weather, we'd like to hear it. I want to end with one potentially dorky question, but for those of us who have followed hurricanes over the years, we know there are always names when it eventually becomes a hurricane. And when I Googled Ernesto earlier, a Google result came up for Hurricane Ernesto in 2006. And I thought that we never repeated hurricane names. Is that a myth of pop culture? And are we repeating hurricane names because we have seen so many in recent years?
So when they come out with a list of hurricane names, they actually recycle them every 6 years. So these names will actually reappear. Now, if the storm is bad enough, I mean, you think back to Katrina, Ian, Sandy, some of the big name storms, those names get retired. And so if a storm causes a lot of devastation, we don't want people to kind of relive those kind of moments if there was another Katrina, let's say, right? Katrina is gone. We will never have another Hurricane Katrina. So those names get retired and to not be used again. However, we do have a lot of storms that just go out into the Atlantic, don't really impact anyone or cause very minor damage. Those storm names will get repeated every 6 years.
I see. So that's why we're seeing Ernesto. But if folks are Googling at this point in time on Monday, it is not yet a hurricane. It's not even a tropical storm. It is just, Alex, a tropical rainstorm.
Correct. Yep. And again, we have to wait for the center of circulation to really form a closed low. Those winds nice and tight, going counterclockwise until it gets its official designation. And like I said, the hurricane hunters are out there right now flying around, and they'll continue to fly around in this storm, as they always do with storms that have the potential to impact population, to kind of give us the best data, the most accurate wind speeds, and to eventually let us know if it eventually becomes Ernesto.
Alex DaSilva, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight as AccuWeather's lead hurricane expert.
Thank you.